I know how deeply you, the entire nation, but I think I may say the whole world, sympathize with me in the irreparable loss we've all suffered.
It happened just 1 minute ago. The velvet drapes of Clarence House quivered as King Charles stepped before the cameras, his expression grave, his voice almost breaking. "Effective immediately," he declared. "Her Majesty the Queen Consort, Camilla, will relinquish her royal title pending further investigation." The words hung in the air like thunder in a cathedral. For the first time in modern royal history, a monarch had publicly severed the bond of his own crown. The scene was hauntingly regal, the Queen Mary's crown resting silently on a pedestal beside him, its Cullinan diamonds glinting coldly in the studio lights. Those same jewels that once symbolized unity now shimmered like witnesses to betrayal. Behind the lens, aides stood frozen. One whispered, "It's done." Outside, reporters shouted questions drowned by the echo of church bells from St. James's. The reason, as Buckingham insiders confirm, was as stunning as the declaration itself. A sapphire brooch once belonging to Princess Diana had surfaced at a Geneva auction, traced back to private possession from Raymil House, Camilla's own estate. Within hours, investigators linked the sale to an unnamed intermediary now under questioning. It was Anne who first raised the alarm, William who pushed for accountability, and Catherine, the poised figure of the future, who urged her father-in-law to protect the integrity of the crown, no matter the cost. Witnesses say Charles's hands trembled as he signed the final decree. His words, though few, carried centuries of burden. The crown must remain pure, even when hearts are not. Now the monarchy stands at a crossroads, its legacy jeweled and fractured all at once. What forced this tragic confrontation between loyalty and law? And could this scandal rewrite the royal line of succession itself? Stay with me, because behind this announcement lies a chain of secrets, betrayals, and heirlooms that will shake the House of Windsor to its very core. To understand how the monarchy reached this breaking point, we must return to the quiet weeks before that fateful October day. In early autumn of 2025, the royal household had been preparing for the annual Heritage Gala, a glittering charity event meant to celebrate Britain's timeless craftsmanship, diamonds, art, and royal legacy. Camilla was scheduled to wear the Queen Mary's crown, adorned with Cullinan stones, alongside several heirlooms once belonging to Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Diana. To the public, it was just another evening of royal splendor. Behind the scenes, it became the spark of a crisis. Whispers began when a rare sapphire brooch identical to one worn by Diana during her early years as Princess of Wales surfaced at a private auction in Geneva. The listing, under a discreet Swiss firm, caught the attention of royal collectors. Within days, experts confirmed the engraving matched that of a missing piece from Diana's personal inventory, one supposedly archived within the Royal Collection Trust. The provenance trail led back, shockingly, to Raymil House, Camilla's private residence in Wiltshire. At first, the palace tried to contain it. Aides dismissed the claim as a misattributed heirloom, but insiders knew otherwise. Princess Anne, meticulous as ever, demanded a private audit of the royal jewelry registry. The audit exposed inconsistencies, missing documentation, unrecorded transfers, and valuation notes bearing Camilla's initials. Meanwhile, William and Catherine were caught between family loyalty and national duty. They visited Clarence House under the guise of a family dinner. But those close to them say the conversation turned icy. "Mother's memory is not a commodity," William reportedly said. Catherine, calm but firm, added, "The crown shines brightest when it's honest." For King Charles, the revelation was devastating. The jewels weren't just treasures, they were fragments of history, symbols of continuity passed from his mother to him. Now they stood as evidence of betrayal inside his own home. That's when the first letter of inquiry was sent from the palace to Geneva. It bore the king's signature, and just 3 words in his handwriting, "Confirm the truth." The truth, as it turned out, would tear through the monarchy like lightning through glass. The first real tremor within the palace didn't come from the press, it came from the silence of its corridors. As October crept closer, courtiers began noticing strange adjustments. The royal jewel registry, usually a closely guarded archive at the Tower of London, was abruptly transferred to Clarence House for what was described as a private audit. No public explanation followed, yet for those who knew the rhythms of royal life, such an act was seismic. When the jewels move, something bigger always moves with them. Inside the Lancaster Room, where the king met advisors, tension was thick enough to touch. The Geneva firm had confirmed the auction's authenticity. The sapphire brooch was indeed the missing piece from Princess Diana's private collection, and the buyer's receipt traced back to an offshore account with ties to Raymill House. When the report reached King Charles's desk, he reportedly read it 3 times, then whispered only 2 words: "Not again." That phrase carried decades of ghosts. Throughout his reign, whispers had lingered about Camilla's taste for the ornate, from the pearl chokers worn too soon after Diana's passing to the unverified rumors that Queen Elizabeth II's aquamarine necklace had once gone missing before quietly reappearing. The tabloids loved such stories, but this time it wasn't gossip. This was evidence, signed and sealed. Princess Anne was the first to confront her brother. She arrived at Clarence House without warning, her stride brisk, her words even sharper. "You can't keep this contained," she told him. "The world deserves clarity, not cover-ups." Charles said nothing, just turned his eyes to the portrait of their mother. Anne later confided to a friend that it was the first time she had ever seen him look afraid. Meanwhile, Prince William began to act. Quietly, deliberately, he met with senior courtiers to draft what they called the integrity paper, a private memorandum outlining the royal family's response should the investigation turn public. Catherine assisted in crafting its language, her handwriting appearing in the margins beside William's. One aide described her presence as the calm between the storms. But calm has limits. Late one evening, as the royal household settled into uneasy silence, a member of staff found Camilla in the white drawing room, staring at the Queen Mary's crown displayed beneath glass. "Do you think they'd take it from me?" she asked softly, not expecting an answer. The staffer bowed and left. By the time dawn broke, the situation had become irreversible. Geneva's investigators had delivered their final verification. The brooch had indeed been sold under Camilla's private authorization. Whether she had known or not, no longer mattered. Perception would become reality. At breakfast that morning, William confronted his father directly. Witnesses described it as a scene of heartbreak rather than anger. "You always taught me that the crown belongs to the people," William said. "Now you must prove it." Charles looked up from his tea and replied, "The crown also belongs to history, and history doesn't forgive easily." Within 24 hours, Anne and William presented their findings to the king formally. Catherine attended, wearing a simple cream dress and Diana's engagement ring, a visual reminder of the past watching over the present. The meeting ended without resolution, but with one clear decision. The palace would issue an internal summons for Camilla to respond before the Privy Council. Outside the palace walls, rumors began to leak. Tabloids published grainy photos of boxes being carried into Clarence House. News anchors speculated on missing royal artifacts. Across London, cafe conversations shifted from politics to palace scandal. One headline read, "Diana's jewels resurface, is history repeating itself?" Through it all, Catherine remained the silent face of dignity. At a children's charity event that week, she was photographed wearing a simple pearl pendant, an intentional echo of Elizabeth's timeless restraint. Commentators praised her composure, calling her the modern heir to grace. And yet, amidst all the noise, a single question lingered, whispered in drawing rooms, debated online, and carried through the autumn rain. How much truth can the monarchy survive? Before we go deeper into this crisis, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think King Charles will choose love or legacy in the end? And from where in the world are you watching this story unfold? London, Sydney, Manila, New York? Let me know in the comments below, because this royal drama has truly become global. What came next would turn whispers into thunder and a family scandal into an event that would redefine the crown itself. When the royal household issued a brief statement on the evening of 11 October, the wording was deceptively calm. Her Majesty the Queen Consort is assisting with an internal inquiry regarding the provenance of select royal heirlooms. The phrase, assisting with an inquiry, was the palace's gentlest euphemism for disaster. Behind those walls of polished stone, alliances fractured quietly, and the monarchy's most private chamber became its courtroom. Inside Clarence House, the meeting began under a veil of ceremony that quickly evaporated. King Charles sat at the head of the long mahogany table in the Maple Room, the same space where he once rehearsed his coronation speech. To his right sat Princess Anne, her posture unyielding. To his left, Prince William and Catherine, who had been summoned less as heirs and more as witnesses to the integrity of the crown. The atmosphere was glacial. At the far end of the room, Camilla arrived escorted by a private secretary. Her face was pale, expression unreadable, her usual pearls replaced by a simple gold chain. As she took her seat, she broke the silence first. "You all think I've stolen something," she said quietly. "You think I've stolen her." The word her needed no clarification. Everyone in the room knew she meant Diana. Charles's reply was slow, almost fragile. "This isn't about her. It's about the crown, and what the world now believes of it." Anne unfolded a folder marked confidential, sliding it across the table. Inside lay documents from Geneva, photographs, signatures, valuations. The evidence was damning. Camilla lifted the pages with trembling fingers. "These aren't my instructions," she whispered. "Someone used my name." William's tone, though steady, carried restrained fury. "Then you must name them, because silence will ruin more than your reputation." For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the mantel clock. Then Charles leaned back, exhaling. "It doesn't matter who signed it anymore. The crown can't afford ambiguity." His words weren't cruel, they were final. Behind him, a footman adjusted the Queen Mary's crown in its display case, the Cullinan diamonds glinting like liquid fire under the chandeliers. That crown had become the room's silent judge. Camilla's restraint cracked. "Do you think I ever wanted this life?" she said, voice shaking. "I spent years rebuilding it for you, for this family. Now you want to destroy me because of one mistake I didn't make." Anne's response was blunt but not unkind. "No one's destroying you, Camilla. You did this by letting trust slip through your fingers." Catherine, who had been silent until then, finally spoke, her tone calm, almost sorrowful. "The jewels were never just ornaments. They were stories, motherhood, duty, loss. When one goes missing, it's not only gold that disappears, it's memory." Her words hung in the air like a benediction. Even Camilla lowered her eyes. By midnight, the decision was made. The Privy Council would convene at dawn, and the king would issue a statement confirming the temporary removal of Camilla's title pending the investigation. The phrasing was meant to soften the blow, but everyone in the room understood what it really meant. The end of her reign as queen consort. After the meeting, Charles lingered alone in the room. A single glass of scotch sat untouched beside the folder marked confidential. He stared at the reflection of the crown, its diamonds splitting the lamplight into spectral hues. In that fractured glow, he saw everything: the ghost of Diana, the image of Elizabeth, the weight of a lineage that demanded perfection at all costs. He pressed his palm flat against the table and whispered, "The crown endures." It was both a prayer and a surrender. Elsewhere, Camilla returned to Raymil House under quiet escort. The estate that once symbolized her independence now felt like exile. She walked into the drawing room, where the fire had burned low, and found a single object placed on the mantel, a framed photograph of her coronation beside Charles, the crown slightly tilted on her head. She stared at it for a long time before turning it face down. At Windsor, Anne called her brother one last time that night. "You've done the right thing," she said. "But you know it won't heal anything," Charles replied. "It's not meant to heal, it's meant to protect." The next morning, 12 October, the castle bells rang early, not in celebration, but in formality. Courtiers whispered that the sound felt colder than usual, hollow even. William and Catherine arrived first at Clarence House, stepping out of the royal car in silence. Catherine carried a thin folder labeled Succession Protocol, Revised. She didn't need to speak. The message was clear. The monarchy had survived wars, abdications, and scandals before. But this time was different. This wasn't rebellion or illness, it was conscience. And conscience, once awakened, cannot be silenced by decree or diamonds. By sunset, the world would know what the family had fought to keep private for weeks. And by nightfall, the woman once crowned queen would be without a title, leaving behind only the glimmer of jewels that had outlasted her name. The morning of 13 October 2025 broke cold and metallic. The sky over Clarence House the same color as the crown that would no longer rest on Camilla's head. Reporters lined the wrought iron gates, their breath fogging in the air. Cameras aimed like bayonets at the palace entrance. Inside, the marble corridors echoed with the sharp click of shoes, staff moving briskly, courtiers whispering orders that sounded more like prayers. At precisely 10 a.m., King Charles entered the Grand Hall. His face was drawn, his uniform immaculate, the ribbons and medals a reminder of decades spent in service to the crown. Before him stood the lectern draped in royal crimson. A single spotlight illuminated the Queen Mary's crown, displayed beside him as both relic and witness. The room filled with officials, press, and a handful of royal family members. William stood behind his father, his posture straight but heavy with grief. Catherine was beside him, her expression carved in quiet strength, while Anne lingered at the edge of the platform, eyes fixed on the floor. The atmosphere was funeral-like, an execution of titles, not of life. Charles began softly, almost whispering, "It is with profound sadness that I confirm a decision which has not come easily. The crown, as an institution of service and truth, must remain beyond reproach. Her Majesty, the Queen Consort, Camilla, will henceforth withdraw from all royal duties and relinquish her title." The silence afterward was absolute. Then, as if the weight of centuries shifted, he added, "This decision is made not in anger but in preservation. The jewels of this crown are more than stones. They are symbols of the trust between sovereign and people. That trust must never be broken." In the gallery, flashes erupted like lightning. The words had barely settled before every global news outlet carried the headline, "King Charles confirms Camilla's removal." The BBC interrupted its broadcast with the royal seal. Sky News opened with the caption, "Crown in Crisis." Outside, the crowd erupted into stunned murmurs. Some cheered, others cried. Older women clutched small portraits of Diana, whispering prayers, as if a wound decades old had been reopened. At Kensington Palace, floral tributes began to appear at the gates, a mixture of lilies, notes, and a single sapphire brooch replica left by an anonymous hand. Inside the hall, Charles paused, visibly trembling. He turned slightly toward William. "It is time," he said quietly. William stepped forward and placed a velvet-covered document on the lectern, the royal decree already signed by both father and Privy Council. Catherine reached out subtly, resting her hand over his for a heartbeat, anchoring him in the moment. The king concluded with one final line that would be quoted for generations. "The strength of the monarchy is not measured by its splendor, but by its conscience." When he finished, Charles lowered his head. It was Anne who first broke protocol, stepping toward him and laying a gloved hand on his shoulder. "She will understand someday," she murmured. Cameras caught the gesture. It became the image of the day. Moments later, William escorted Catherine from the hall. Their car moved slowly through the palace gates, greeted by a wave of flashbulbs and chants of, "Long live the Prince and Princess of Wales." In that instant, their future as king and queen to be crystallized, not through ceremony, but through tragedy. Far away at Raymil House, Camilla watched the announcement alone. A single television flickered in the dimness of her sitting room. The newscaster's voice trembled. "King Charles has confirmed the Queen Consort's withdrawal amid allegations involving royal jewels." She didn't cry. She simply removed her ring, placed it on the table and whispered, "So it ends." Back at Clarence House, the king dismissed his aides and walked alone into the maple room, where the now untitled crown gleamed under glass. He reached out but did not touch it. For a brief moment, his reflection overlapped with that of the diamonds, his face fragmented into shards of light and shadow. A whisper escaped him, "Forgive me." Outside, The bells of St. James's Palace tolled 12 times, their echoes drifting across London. For the people, it marked a reckoning. For the monarchy, it marked rebirth. History would call it the day of the crown's reckoning, when love, legacy, and conscience collided beneath the weight of diamonds that had outlasted every heart that ever wore them. By nightfall on 13 October, London had fallen into a strange, suspended silence, neither celebration nor mourning, but something that felt like both. The gilded gates of Clarence House glimmered under lamplight as the crowd outside swelled. Some held Union Jacks, others clutched framed photos of Diana, whispering as though she could somehow hear what had happened. Inside the palace, there was no jubilation. The royal family had done what protocol demanded, but it came at a cost none of them could measure. King Charles spent the evening in his private library, the same room where he had once written speeches about unity and compassion. Now, surrounded by unread books and cooling tea, he stared at the fireplace in silence. The flames flickered over the royal seal on the statement he had signed, only hours earlier, the decree that stripped Camilla of her title. "History will see this differently," Princess Anne told him as she entered quietly, her tone practical but softened with fatigue. Charles didn't look up. "History never weeps," he said. "People do." At Kensington Palace, William and Catherine faced their own storm. Public sympathy had turned toward them overnight. Social media flooded with messages hailing Catherine as the people's queen and praising William for defending his mother's legacy. It was exactly the kind of attention they never wanted. "It doesn't feel like victory," William admitted. Catherine, ever steady, touched his arm. "It's not victory," she said. "It's survival." Still, the press refused to rest. Every channel replayed Charles's speech in slow motion. The tremor in his voice, the tear that caught the corner of his eye. Headlines clashed between tragedy and triumph. The king's breaking point, justice for Diana, crown restored. Even foreign outlets weighed in. In France, Le Monde called it a moment of moral resurrection. In the US, Time magazine labeled it the monarchy's reckoning. Meanwhile, at Raymil House, Camilla remained under discreet watch. The front gates were closed, her personal staff reduced to a handful of loyal attendants. She refused interviews, refused sympathy. "I am not to be pitied," she told one aide. "I am simply finished." Late that night, she walked alone into her garden, once her sanctuary, and found the air colder than she remembered. Her eyes fell on a single rosebush planted years ago by Charles. She plucked a fading bloom and let it fall to the ground. Back in London, Catherine received a private courier at dawn, a velvet box from the royal collection, sealed with the king's insignia. Inside rested the Queen Mary's crown, its Cullinan diamonds gleaming softly in the morning light. A handwritten note from Charles read, "For safekeeping until it is time." Catherine closed the box carefully, aware of the weight it carried, not of jewels, but of judgment. The transfer was unofficial, symbolic perhaps, yet the meaning was clear. She was now the custodian of what Camilla had lost. The next day, Westminster Abbey hosted a subdued service of reflection, attended only by the immediate family. No cameras, no press. The choir sang softly beneath the vaulted ceiling, their voices echoing with sorrow and reverence. As the final hymn ended, Charles whispered a short prayer under his breath. "May mercy outshine regret." Outside, the rain began to fall fine, silver rain that streaked the stained glass windows like tears. For the first time in decades, Britain's monarchy stood unadorned, stripped of illusion, tempered by truth. And though the scandal had shaken its foundations, something purer emerged from the ruins. A sense that the crown, no matter how battered, still held meaning because it had faced its own reflection and not turned away. The world saw an ending. But within the palace, those who truly understood saw it for what it was, the painful, necessary birth of a new era. As dusk settled over London, the bells of Westminster tolled once more, not for celebration, but remembrance. Inside Burke Hall, far from the eyes of the world, King Charles sat alone by the window, the Scottish wind brushing through the curtains. On the table before him lay a letter written in his careful cursive, sealed in royal wax. The addressee read simply, To my sons. He had rewritten it 3 times before settling on the words that mattered most. The jewels of this family are not made of diamonds. They are honesty, compassion, and restraint. If any of those are lost, the crown will lose its shine. Then, with a deep breath, he placed the seal and closed the envelope. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, the world outside buzzed with news of a restored monarchy. Crowds gathered to glimpse William and Catherine as they departed for a charity event, their first public appearance since the announcement. The public saw poise and calm, but within the palace, everyone knew the truth. The transition had been born of heartbreak, not ambition. Catherine wore a soft gray gown that caught the evening light, and on her wrist gleamed Queen Elizabeth's pearl bracelet, a symbol of continuity. When she stepped from the car, the crowd applauded not for scandal, but for stability. William took her hand, whispering, "Mother would have been proud." For the first time in weeks, his smile didn't look forced. Far from the cameras, Camilla watched the broadcast alone from Raymill House. She turned off the television before the closing commentary and gazed into the quiet of her empty sitting room. On the mantel lay the same photograph from her coronation, but now it had been turned upright again. Perhaps forgiveness, like truth, takes time to return. And so the crown endured, not because it was flawless, but because it faced its flaws and still stood. This story of greed, grace, and redemption isn't only about royalty, it's about all of us. Whether we lead families, teams, or entire nations, the real measure of power is knowing when to protect what matters most and when to let go. The jewels of life are not possessions, they are principles. Maybe that's the lesson King Charles wanted the world to remember, that legacy isn't built in palaces, but in the courage to do what is right, even when it costs everything. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect on what legacy means to you. Tap like if you believe that honesty and humility can outshine power. Leave a comment below. Do you think King Charles made the right decision, or did loyalty demand another path? And tell us where you're watching from: London, Manila, Toronto, or New York, because these royal stories reach hearts far beyond the gates of Windsor. And before you go, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next royal revelation, because the crown may rest for now, but the story of power, love, and consequence is far from over.